Hey, welcome to Write More Light. My name is Sarah with the Midwest Writing Center, and this is Write More Light. The format for I always do this out of order. The format for today's show, we're going to have an awesome interview with author Rachel Corsini. Her debut novel, Sushi and Sea Lions, is coming out May 16th, and I have so far loved watching her story online, and I also have loved her as a human. So I'm super pumped to talk about that whole thing with her. Then, of course, I'll give updates on the Midwest Writing Center, and we will have a 5-minute free write based on Sushi and Sea Lions. It'll be fun. Rachel, thanks for hanging out.
I'm so excited. Thank you for having me. Hi.
Hey. So if you don't mind, I'd love to start with you did a little series on Instagram. Oh, can you put your handle, your Instagram handle, Twitter handle, all those handles in the chat, and I'll share those on our Facebook.
Absolutely. It is.
Um so you talked about the process of writing and selling this novel in short little videos, which were super fun, super engaging,
Yeah.
and also obviously I had personal stake in them. So yeah, do you mind sharing that?
So, I mean, I could like go all the way back I guess I could go all the way back to the beginning, right? So, when I guess we'll go back to like high school where the journey kind of really started. I always kept a journal and I kind of like always pretended to be like a little Joe March when I was younger. And I always kept a journal and I like wrote in my room training as a pre-professional ballet dancer because that was like what I really, really, really wanted. And so I went to high school. I went to professional performing arts high school because I wanted to dance. Um, and then, along that journey, there were, certain things that happened that I was like, I don't really know if I want this anymore. And so but I always continued to write and I always continued to read. I was always an avid reader. I mean, I demolished books. Like I could like just barreled through books and kept a journal and I wrote. And then I like that we have the time to do this because you get the whole story. And then I discovered fanfic because I really loved this movie called Newsies, which is a bunch of dancing newsboys in 1899. And so I started writing through fan fiction and I would write stories about these like newsboys, right? So this prompted me to take a creative writing elective in high school. And I really did well during that class. My writing teacher said, well, I kind of get the impression from you that you're a little bit done with dance and the dance world. And I was like, yes. And I have no idea what I want to do. And she said, well, why don't you go to school for writing? She's like, I think your stories are really good. Your stories are engaging. And I think you'll be successful there. And so that's how I ended up, long story short, applying to Columbia College Chicago, where I was accepted, had never been to Chicago ever a day in my life. And then I went to Columbia College Chicago for creative writing and took my first like real writing class where I was just like thrown into this room with all these people who were like, I'm a writer. And Sarah also like, I am a writer. And I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Take a place. That is like my favorite thing ever. Like in like the first workshop. So everything with like the Columbia College Chicago story workshop method is very like, in your mind's eye and take a place. And like, I talked about this on Instagram too, but I was like, take what place? Like, am I standing somewhere? Am I moving somewhere? And no, it's just in your brain. And then so you're like designing a place in your brain. I'm not gonna lie, these kind of things do help because you're supposed to see things when you write. And then their other big thing was also about objects. And at first it's like, okay, this is kind of bullshit. But then like when you actually give into it, it really isn't bullshit because it helps you write. So, and then from there, so then I started from there. And then, but Columbia's program was very literary in nature. And I don't think I was ever a literary writer. I was always kind of a genre writer. So I did kind of start to struggle there with like what kind of stories am I telling? And I would get told all the time, right? Like, well, write from what you know and reveal things and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, but that's not that fun. Like, it wasn't fun to me yet. And then I went to Italy and I started writing this total bodice ripper Renaissance story where she was like riding horses through fields and like very impassioned. And she wanted like this whole different life. And it was like the beautiful dresses or whatever. And I was like, oh, this is fun. Um, and then, after that kind of life sort of hit, and then I got very busy and the writing sort of like ended up going by the wayside and the journaling and stuff like that. But I worked in medical publishing for a while, which was also a little soul killing. And I realized I hated it. And then I went back to school to be a teacher. So that kind of ignited the creative spark again and like the love of books and stories because I was like bringing them to my students. Um, and then from there, I sort of had this, I had this like breakup that wasn't a breakup. And of course, millennials, right? So I had this breakup that wasn't a breakup and I was entirely just catatonic and I couldn't function. And my aunt said to me, she was like, well, why don't you write a book? And I said, okay. So I started writing. And so back to my college days where they were like, write what you know. Oh boy. So I wrote what I knew. And then now it was done. And it was like, well, what do I do with this? And so I kind of turned to I turned to an online writing platform and I started posting it. Um, and then from there, it kind of got recognition, but I don't think it was really ready for publication yet at that point. Sushi and Sea Lions, it like really there, it was too long. It was too muddled. It was just a lot of like stream of consciousness a little bit too. Like the plot wasn't really set or, stuff like that. It was very long when I first started writing it. And then I entered into a mentorship contest that I won. And my mentor was really the one, we worked one-on-one together. My mentor was really the one who was like, this is Daniela's story. That's the character in the book. But, really, she's actually very close to me as a character. She's like, this is her story. And you need to take that and refine it and get raw with her emotions and her feelings. And, don't be afraid to do that. That's when it hit the jackpot. And that's when, after that, is when I started querying. I mean, we could talk about querying, which is soul crushing and awful. And I received over 100 rejections for Sushi and Sea Lions. But I received at least 24 requests, a combination of agents and small presses, which is incredible for your first book. And, but agents, I started to see the same response from agents where it was like, it's not about your writing. They didn't know what to do with it because it wasn't a step-by-step contemporary romance. Again, right? I talked about being a genre writer. It wasn't a step-by-step contemporary romance, but it wasn't like literary fiction either. So when my small press approached me and picked it up, they were like, this is women's fiction, heavy romance. That's what this story is, because it's not just all the beats of like save the cat. It's not like a Harlequin. It's not your standard, it's not your standard meet cute. It doesn't function that way. There's more like internal development that happens there. And that's what I really liked about the publisher that I ended up going with. But if you're going to query anything, be ready, because it is a journey. It is a journey. I queried for about 9 months before I was accepted. And I had 3 different offers on Sushi and Sea Lions, and I went with this press. I actually ended up getting to choose at the end, which is also incredible, right? Because I was starting to panic that no one was going to take it, and then I was back to square one. But they did, and I got to pick, which is another thing, right? Like sometimes that magic happens, and you do get to pick. But yeah, so that's kind of the journey. That's the publishing journey.
I love that. I love every step of it, and I have questions about every step of this.
Yay.
I want to say I never actually explained this. Um, Rachel and I met at Columbia College. We took one class together, which was like not a study abroad, like a study domestic away from
Yes.
home class
Yes.
in New Orleans. Um, and it sounds like you're pretty true to your roots from
Yes.
my recollection of your writing, which makes me really happy. I feel like people do so much work to like be sellable, which
Yes.
is a different thing. Clearly your book is hard to market for a lot of people, which is
Yes.
interesting and silly. And a pet issue of mine. Like I love young adult as a genre, and it only exists as a genre for marketing, right? We don't
Yes.
see so it's about young adult and children's literature are about characters who are that age, but like because it didn't exist before, or if it had been written today, To Kill a Mockingbird would be children's lit. Like, think for a
Yes.
second, guys.
Right. Exactly. So like the whole like, you know, trying to go traditional trade with this book was, you know, now I know things, and it was always going to be difficult because not that I'm like breaking the genre, but it was not written it was not written to certain specifications where it was like an agent could say, well, she hits A, B, C, and D, and this is exactly what it is. And it wasn't and it was never written for that, it was never written with those intentions. And but, I think I ended up exactly where I was supposed to be in terms of having small press and going with them, and they care about my story, they care about my book. Um and you know, having that and having them decide like we're going to figure out how to market this, not that you needed to figure out how to write it to be marketable for what is already out there, right? That was what I really appreciated about that.
So when you nope, rewinding, sorry. Um I found myself for years and years, and I know it's changed now, talking crap about the story workshop method. And I don't know what's changed at Columbia, but I did learn about the changes recently. Like it's creative writing now, not fiction or poetry, for example. Um, but it did like looking back, and I've studied workshopping, and I've studied writing schools, and I've studied craft, right? And I see now why they don't give you directions in advance. So you walk in there, and all of us, I too, I thought everyone knew what they were doing. I thought that I was like the only new person in the room, but nobody knew what was happening on the first day. And why, people retell your story to you instead of giving like directed feedback. I get it now. And I love that you like eventually came around to that too, because it infuriated me.
Yes, because you were like, well, wait a minute, like what do you like, it just, you did kind of feel like a little in the twilight zone sometimes. I was like, what is happening? But yes, oh my god, I almost forgot that like you would give out some of the story, and then your class or someone in your would retell it to you. And that's actually really invaluable because if you miss something, right, you know what the story is. And if you miss something, you're like, wait a minute, you didn't get that in this whole thing that I wrote. And they would be like, no. And you'd be like, crap, I got to rewrite this.
And there's also like if somebody tells it to you wrong, like yeah, yeah, totally.
Right.
um,
Yes.
have you, outside of that mentorship program,
Yeah.
have you done any other sort of workshopping between undergrad and now?
No, I did no other writing classes. I just sort of, I like, you know what I think was like the best writing class for this? I just like lived. and that's like a very odd thing to say. Like, you know, I did always have the dream, right? Like that I was going to write a book and publish a book, and I did. I tried to write, and I tried to write stories, and I had started books, and I had stopped writing books, and I had done this that were like very fictionalized and had nothing to do with me or nothing that I really cared about. And then I sort of like, I said, oh, life got in the way and I stopped writing. It Now that I look at it, it wasn't really about that. It was that I had to live and experience things and go through things and process them, and I had to be able to access my own life to write. So, that whole idea of write what you know, that was being thrust upon us as these like young, early, like late teenagers, early 20 somethings that you didn't really understand fully, I think, um, now made total sense, right? I think it just makes sense that I'm not publishing a book now until I'm in my mid 30s.
I
Yeah.
think that artists in general need to like live in order to make art. And I think that's sort of underappreciated, or at least like we don't want to believe it maybe. But like what are you arting about if not existence, you know? I don't know, that
Yeah,
got a little weird and philosophical there, but
but it's
there's
true.
there's something my the director at the writing center says. He doesn't love it when I call him my boss all the time, which is that the writing is still there. Like you said, life got in the way, but the writing is always there. If you want to come back to it, it's there. I have found that really helpful for like, you know, slow times. But also I think that people think that if they're not actively writing every single day, because we hear that a lot too, that you have to write every
Yes.
single day, then like they don't get to call themselves writers anymore. But like the writing doesn't go away. You didn't lose your ability to know words or hold a pen, or however it is you write. You can dictate. I don't care what you do.
No, I wholeheartedly agree with you. It is always there. I'm not an everyday writer. I'll come out there and say it. I don't write every day. Um, I find that like I need reflection, and I need like to step away from things sometimes, especially like if I am overstressed or I'm in like a lot of like upheaval and stuff. I can't also be putting myself onto a page. And I like, giving myself grace for that, like that's become a learning process too. I mean, I am halfway into a second book, and just like, yeah, yeah. But just this year has been a little difficult. And so I haven't been able to really pluck away a lot at that manuscript. And I did start to feel really bad about that. I'm like, oh my God, am I ever going to finish this second book? Did I forget how to write a book? I mean, I wrote one book, I could write another book. I don't get what's happening. But really, it was just because of all the things that were happening. And, I didn't forget how to write. I didn't forget the characters. I just need some space. And that's fine. I'm going to finish it. I'm going to go back. It's going to get done. It'll get done.
That's so important too, because like if you're getting stressed out about not writing, you're not going to be able to write. That's
No.
something I always give the advice when like somebody has writer's block or some equivalent of that, is like you need to get out of that brain. Like try journaling. I find, if I feel blocked up, all the writing needs to go into getting that out, and then I'll have space for it. But yeah, no, it's so much healthier for you. You're going to produce better writing if you just give yourself some space.
Yep. Space is the best. And I also call it like, staring at the wall time. That's this staring at the wall. It's like, how other writers, I don't know about you, but like when you're like in the shower, you'll like think of something, stare at the wall time, right? Like you'll think of like a scene, or you think of something that needs to
I
happen in the
love it.
story. Stare at the wall, right? Like where you're just like, I am literally a zombie and not doing anything. But then you're like, this is what has to go here, or this is what I need to hit next. And then it comes. But if you're not in a place in your life where you're able to do that, it's very difficult. So, the patience and the grace that like it'll come, is very important. You know, I find that to be very important, especially for me. You know, I get a little, every once in a while, I just get like overwhelmed and I'm like, what is happening?
I read it a long time ago, so I don't have like receipts to I'm sitting outside, and nature is happening around me, and that's why I keep looking away. Um
Nature.
um the that boredom is really important to innovation, which I think is really interesting. And that's something that like I read it in the context of like big businesses and whatever. Um, but staring at the wall time, you're right. When you zone out, you zone in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, you do. Absolutely. It's you need that because how are you creating if there's no space to create anything? It's very important. You need to have that space, you know, in order to do that. Or you need to be crying on your couch with a bottle of wine and be like, I either need therapy or I need to write something.
Maybe both.
Maybe both.
Uh okay, so so this is like invigorating. I'm gonna try and get back to the topic. Um what so can you tell me, it's okay if it's like too much. Can you tell me what women's fiction is?
So, in my opinion, women's fiction is a character driven story where the female takes the lead, or you know, someone who is female leaning or like or that, right? They take precedence in the story, and they are looking to achieve some sort of development or change within themselves. So to me, it is not really about like, you know, major plot events. It's more about the things that help that character achieve their desire from the beginning of the book. And usually it is an internal desire or something that they don't really know that they needed until it actually happens in the story. So that to me is women's fiction. And that is what happens in Sushi and Sea Lions. That's what she goes through in that book.
Can you give us the synopsis, the elevator
Oh,
pitch, the back of the book? Your
I
your
will.
choice.
I will read you the back. I'll read you the back of the book. So
Wait, show us the front first.
okay, so this is the front. Sushi and Sea
Yay.
Lions. I know it's so pretty. Sorry, I'm very excited. It's my first book, so I'm like, nah. Okay, but so basically, I will start off and I will just let you know when this character starts off in the story, her whole life is a mess. So that's also a key to women's fiction. Like Rock On, her whole life is falling apart. Yes. And she's kind of got to get her life together. So I'll read you the blurb from the back of the book so that you can get a sense of like what's happening in the story. When a career-ending injury and a messy breakup send prima ballerina Daniela Verdi back to Queens, New York, she fills her days with countless distractions, meaningless sex, Pinot Grigio, and video games. It really wasn't that far off, just letting you know. So it takes a chance meeting with her
Listen,
brother's best
who
friend.
hasn't been there?
Yeah, oh, it was pretty bad. It takes a chance meeting with her brother's best friend, Vincent Labate, for her to remember who she was before the stage lights and distractions of the Upper West Side. She's convinced that Vincent could never love a girl like her, broken, insecure, and stumbling her way through life. What Daniela didn't count on is that Vincent is as scarred as she is after divorcing his cheating wife and going through an equally messy child custody fight. Soon enough, old vulnerabilities rear their ugly heads, opening a crack in Daniela's perfectly imperfect romance. As Daniela and Vincent's relationship develops, will Daniela learn to accept that a dream life isn't all it's cracked up to be? So that is what the story is about.
Sorry. I know I'm supposed to have words now. That sounds like the kind of book that gets you out of a funk, like as a reader, which
Yeah.
I suppose is a weird thing to say about a book I haven't read, but
But we'll read soon. You said you
I pre-ordered, and I put the pre-order link in the chat on our live stream.
Yay.
And we know this book will also be available at Walmart.
It's available for pre-order at Walmart, which is incredible. But I think you hit the nail on the head. So when I first started drafting this, it ended very different than what is in the story. Probably was not in a really good place. So like a little insider tidbit, with the way like this genre goes, exactly what you said, right? Like it gets you out of a reading funk. It makes you feel good at the end. She ended up like more isolated at the end than she does in this story. And then by the time I finished my revisions and I finished my drafts, I was like, no, this is it's a happy book, and she'll have her happy ending, right? So, and that's what I really wanted, and it's like a very hopeful story. I use a lot of dark humor too. Yeah, because I was like, some of the stuff is a little sad. Like, I mean, she's going through a lot of things. And there's also a lot of things that I dealt with in my personal life too. Especially with the whole ballet thing. I mean, I never like had an injury where I had to stop doing ballet, but I stepped away from it because of a lot of the things in ballet itself that can break you. So there's a lot of stuff about perfectionism and being perfect for others. Ballet is all about that. You're striving for perfection in an art that is never perfect. And physically perfect also is a very big thing in the ballet world. There's way more discussions about this than when I was training as a ballerina. And that can very easily like really destroy you and create some very unhealthy habits. And so, those things also are in here that Daniela also deals with. And that was very personal to me as a, that I also dealt with those things in the ballet world. And so this book, it was very healing and hopeful in a lot of different ways. Not just because I was like soul crushed and I needed to do something with myself. I laugh about it, but
Stuff
it's
can
true.
be two things. So I couldn't
Yes.
unmute myself. I don't have glare. I think it's just so bright around my computer that I can't see very well. I don't know, because I'm under a roof.
Okay.
I just don't know why I couldn't unmute, and now I've wasted your time talking about it. I'm really glad that, and I've met you. I would not expect you to shy away from hard stuff in your writing, but I think that a lot of people do, especially if they want to write something nice. And I have so much respect for that. It's also like just way more heartening to read
Yeah.
something nice that's also hard, because that's what life is. It's real, and now I can believe.
Yes. And that was very important to me to have that. And my mentor did really help me with that, because I will say that, because the first draft was I was a little bit afraid because it was very personal. And she was like, I could sense in these certain parts you've like pulled back a little. And she was
Mhm.
like, just let it happen, right? And she's like, and it doesn't have to be so pushy or even so triggering, but it is there. It's in her. It is there, right? And so when I gave into that, then she became more real. Daniela became more real. And mainly what I'm talking about is like she has like an issue with food. Like she has 100% an issue with food. And it rears its ugly head because everything's falling apart, and she talks about how that has been a process for her whole life. And also gradually throughout the story, as she's getting better like everywhere and giving into things and growing, the food becomes less of a battle. And it's never like, her eating disorder went away. No, it becomes less of a focus because she is, because she is happier, and that happens for some people, and that's just the way it is. And
Most
so
stuff gets harder when life gets harder.
everything that you've ever dealt with gets harder when life is hard, and then it ebbs back, right? And so that's something that she deals with. And me and my mentor discussed that too, and she said, I don't know if this was intentional, but the happier she gets, the less she talks about food. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, well, to be perfectly honest, no, but probably for the character, yes.
Yeah.
And right. So, there are those, definitely those things like in that story. And, probably should have, like, that's maybe a little bit of a content warning. It could be triggering for people, but it that is a big part of her life in the story.
I was recently I interviewed Kimon Felix, she's a poet, about her memoir, which is like has every trigger warning, right? And I asked her like why isn't this triggering? And she said, and I guess I just want to know if you agree with this or had a similar experience, that like if she could protect herself from getting triggered, then she could protect the reader from getting triggered.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree, because when I was including this part of Daniela, and also the dealing with the expectation to be perfect, because that can be triggering for people too, right? Like, people are perfectionists and they worked on that, and it's a very difficult thing to overcome. And the food and all of that, when I looked back at those sections, it didn't feel like it was in my face, or where it was like, oh my God, like, I need to, like that. I felt like, oh my God, now I'm going to start like restricting my food again, or I'm going to start doing this, or I'm going to start. It didn't feel like that. It felt more like she is in pain. So she is reverting to habits that she had when she was in pain, and acknowledging those habits now as an adult, because she has a moment in the story where she said, oh, this is happening again. And now I am really there is something really, I need to do something about my life. And so, that's what made it like less, not triggering at all, I don't think.
That makes sense to me. And I think it's also, I mean, I'm just going to credit millennials with this. I could be wrong. Maybe it's Gen X. Uh, but I feel like as we come up, as we become the people who are making the art, um, we're also the generation that's doing, I think, openly working on healing. I think there was certainly plenty of healing happening before us, but we're very open about it. That's coming up in art more than it ever has, and I think that too passes on that healing.
Yes. I fully agree. Like, we're very in tune with, like, we don't just like plow forward when we've like been through something, like, or where we know we need to work on something. It's like, okay, like, I need to be introspective about this, or I need to seek help, or I need to talk about this with somebody, and things like that. Like, we're very aware when we are in an upheaval and we need to work on that. And so when we're addressing, like you said, these things in art, it comes across as, well, this is how, if I was a person, how I would work through this anyway. And so that makes it, that also takes away this hard like trigger, where it's not like, all of a sudden it's in your face and you're like, oh my gosh, like, where it's like so violent at you, and it isn't. It's like almost like it's like a gentle, like, this is what's happening to her, and this is how she's going to deal with it.
Sorry, I was plugging in my computer. um that's awesome. How, so I mean, I guess you've told us um you were going through something similar to Daniela at the beginning of the novel.
Yeah.
But how, I I don't want to say like how removed were you from that, but like how did you start writing? Like how did you go from not writing to, look, I'm writing a novel?
Okay, so I didn't know I was writing a novel when I started this journey. So I started with journaling because I needed to do something. So literally this is exactly what happened. I was with someone who we were friends for 3 years first, and then, we were not friends. It was we became a little bit more than friends, and then it turned into a classic millennial situationship. And when I addressed it, he told me he did not want a relationship, and that's okay. I was completely gutted. But he also would not leave me alone. And so it became a very toxic cycle until finally I was the one who entirely walked away. I removed myself from that entire situation. And, you know, he's still a little angry, but that's okay. Um, be angry. But so then basically Christmas Day, I was crying on my couch, drunk because I had copious amounts of wine. And my aunt came upstairs because I lived with my parents, classic Italian family. I lived with my parents in the upstairs apartment in Queens. And my aunt came upstairs and was like, you need to do something. What happened? You used to write all the time. And so I started journaling. That's where Daniela came from. And that's where her situationship in the beginning of the book came from. And so that character that she deals with in the beginning of the story, that is a breakup, that wasn't a breakup, is entirely based on this situation and her feelings of, I just want him to love me, and I don't understand why he doesn't love me. And that was really hard because I journaled about that and I wrote about that, and it was something that I didn't understand. Maybe I'll never really understand, but eventually, like, it just, from doing that, it just went away. And it was very therapeutic. But then she turned into her own person. She turned into her own person. She turned into Daniela Verdi. And then I started fictionalizing her, and I fictionalized the situation and all of that kind of stuff. And then that's when, like, it started to become a book about her and about Vincent, who I created as the perfect man. No, I'm kidding. He's not perfect, but he came out of being a dream, right? Like, so this was someone that I probably never should have been with. And now who is a partner that I should be with, that I think would match with me? And that's where Vincent's character came from.
When did you know it was going to keep going?
The book?
Hmm.
Oh, when I was like, well, I knew it was going to keep going as a book when I literally could not stop. Like, I could not stop writing the scenes and writing the drafts and thinking about them as characters. And, and also I was like, and she needs her ending. She needs her ending. I was like, Daniela needs her ending. And I was like, this is a book. I said, this is a
Oh,
book.
that's
It's not a story.
beautiful.
It's a book. Yep. And that
Your
was really it. And I
ending.
just sort of furiously, I was like drafting, like a little writing gremlin, like.
Well, I'll read it. That's fine. Uh, like, but I have more questions about this. That's why
Okay.
it's a book, Sarah. You can read it. Okay, so you told us your story. What is your publisher? How did you choose them?
So Creative James Media is my publisher. They are a small press out of Maryland. So when I realized that this was not really good for traditional trade, and I kept getting rejected by agents over and over and over again. I mean, I had agents read fulls and like all this kind of stuff. I started going the small press route. And so one of my writing friends actually saw them and said, these guys are a little bit newer, but they do seem really on, like, the up and up. They're registered with IBPA, Independent Book Publishers of America. So that's usually like a good tip off. I mean, look, any publisher, any press, like there can be issues. You have to, you have to do your due diligence. And also one of the things too, that was, I mean, if any publisher or press asks you to give them money, they are not a publisher. So, and I was not asked to do that. And what made me sign was because before she offered me a contract, we had a meeting and we sat and we met over Zoom first, almost like a call from an agent. And we met over Zoom first and we sat and we discussed my book. And she told me all the things that she really loved. And she discussed the process and when it would come out and blah, blah, blah. And then she offered me the contract and she gave me the 2 weeks to decide if I wanted to sign with her. A press that I had
A lot of
refused.
white flags. Yeah.
Yep. A press that I had refused wanted me to decide only in a week, which is not enough time to notify anyone else that has your manuscript
Hmm.
for them to read it and give you offers, because that's what you do when you're given an offer, even by an agent. There is a 2-week grace, because you are supposed to tell anyone that has your full manuscript that you've been given an offer by an agent or a publisher if they would like to also give you an offer. And so like the one press that I said no to wanted me to decide like almost immediately. And I was not about that. So that made me go with CJM, and they've been really, really great. And also, when she gave me like the plan where it was like, no, you're going to be everywhere. You're going to be in Barnes and Noble. If we can, we will get you physical books into a bookstore. It's very difficult. Don't let anyone tell you that it's not, because shelf space is very expensive. They want to know the books are going to come off the shelf. So that's very important. But you're going to be for sale everywhere. You're going to be in the UK. You're going to be in Australia. You're going to be on Amazon. You're going to be at Barnes and Noble. You're going to be anywhere that books are sold. And to me, that was a real publisher. Not that I was just going to have my book on, Amazon and like Kindle Unlimited. I could have done that myself, right? And did that distribution myself. Where it's distributed through Ingram.
I was gonna
So
say I pre-ordered through our local indie, which means that you're available through Ingram, which
yep,
is what most indies use.
yes. So, that makes it legitimate too. My book is available through Ingram. So independent bookstores, if they're
And
getting requests,
bookshop.org.
I'm on Bookshop. So like so any of those places that are like requesting, or they see me like on the romance section, like next to Tessa Bailey, to be like, oh, let's try a couple copies of these and shelve them if they want to, because it's available. It's not, they're a legitimate publisher. And I'm really grateful that I really did my research and I really looked into that kind of stuff, because, for first time authors submitting to places, it can be hard. You could get screwed really easy.
Did you get support or like advice about querying? That going into that alone sounds very scary.
It is scary. I did. I had friends in my like writing group who had done this already, and so like reviewed my query and stuff like that. But there's like a lot of like online resources. But it really is, if you're going into the query trenches, number one, it takes them forever to get back to you. I sent in batches, so that was pretty good. But you really have to not take you really have to not take the rejections personally. And you kind of just have to have a lot of perseverance, and you just have to keep going. Those are the writers who get published. Those are the ones. They aren't even the best writers. They haven't written the next great American novel, because I'm going to tell you right now, Sushi and Sea Lions is not an American masterpiece. I mean, I think it's pretty good because I wrote it. However, there's like raunchy shower sex. So like, this is the kind of book that it is. I did not write the next great American literary women's fiction. And that's not what I write. The perseverance in continuing and saying, I'm going to be published, was what kept me going. And you just got to keep going. They're going to tell you no and no and no, and you just keep going.
I say, well, I've stopped saying it because people get really mad. But the difference between an artist and a successful artist is shameless self-promotion.
Oh, absolutely. And at first I felt really, really funny about doing it. Now I don't. I'm like, read it. Listen to me read it. I'm gonna put my face all over social media, and unfortunately, it is a huge part now of marketing your book to open up yourself on social media, and you have to put your face there, and you have to talk about your book, and you have to, you know, I've tried a lot of different things. Right now I'm doing like little like reading requests on my Instagram and on my TikTok and stuff. And so you kind of, you got to like try all different, you have to try all different things. And you have to find ways for people to find your book. With a small press, you definitely have to find ways for people to find your book. It could be a little hard, but it's okay.
Yeah, no, MWC has a press, MWC Press. And I feel like that can't be said enough. Like I'm the person marketing your book and I work 15 hours a week. So you need
Right.
to know that going into it with a small press.
Yes, and that was really discussed. But and honestly, my small press does quite a bit that others do not even do. Like, they take out Amazon ads that run on Amazon, which I mean is huge because a lot of places don't do that. They put me on a blog tour. Um, they will offer copies for certain things like that I want to do. So I did a Storygram promotion. I paid for a Storygram promotion. They sent them the copies. They did not make me buy the copies of the physical books. She sent them to them. So that was very nice. A lot of small presses won't even do that. You have to buy the copies and you have to send them to the reviewers. Um, I'm going to host a Goodreads giveaway, and she's going to provide me the copies for the Goodreads giveaway, which again, a lot of presses won't do that. So there are things that my press does in a marketing plan that others don't even try or don't even address to do. And you could spend a fortune trying to market your book. So you have to really pick and choose things too that you want to do. Also, I picked Storygram because they're a very selective Instagram reviewer. Whatever,
Mhm.
they curate their reviewers. They know that like these people are going to get hits, and also they are selective about the books that they accept to run the tours with. So they had interest in my book, which then meant that they were going to really look at and be like, okay, these are going to be the reviewers who are going to be good for this book. So that was something that I wanted to invest my money in. So you have to really weigh these things out.
I assume that it's self-explanatory, but what's a blog tour?
Oh, so a blog tour is basically around the time of my release or like the week before. I can't remember. We don't use Goddess Fish. We use another one, but it's a company that approaches book bloggers and asks them, hey, during this week of release, we would like for you to publish blogs by this author to promote this book. And that's the blog tour. And so I will be writing and doing interviews and stuff like that for established women's fiction, contemporary romance blogs, and then it'll go out to their readership. So that is more exposure for the book, but that's something that you have to pay for, and my publisher pays for that.
So we got a question. Hey Audra, love having you here. About Storygram. So I looked up Storygram. Is it Storygram Tours?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to put that link in the chat, storygramtours.com. Thank you. That's really cool. So it's like God, I'm just aging myself in weird ways today. So it's like an Instagram takeover, but with blogs.
It is. That's exactly what it is. They and it's 5 to 7 different bookstagrammers who will push your book,
That's
right?
pretty cool.
Right. But they're selective. But the reason why I went with them is because they're selective about the books that they take. So the people who follow Storygram and the bookstagrammers that use them, that work with them, know that they're not just being fed, I guess, I don't want to say it like this, but I guess like fed like like literary trash, right?
Well, there are a lot of people who you see people who review books will open with like, I got this arc is an advanced review copy,
Yes.
in exchange for a fair review, and then like the whole thing's just glowing and you're like, is that fair? Like,
Right. Right.
so I dig you. I review books, I review Iowa books for an Iowa magazine, and
Right.
it's, it's not fun if you don't love a book. Like, it's not fun.
No. That's the worst when you really were like, "Ooh, I did not like this book." But I also think, reviewers should have integrity and be honest too,
Mhm.
right? Like, so I had this group called the Romantic Comedy Book Club agree to review my book, and we sent the copy out or whatever. I did not get a 5-star review, which is totally fine. I got a 4-star review, and yeah, I mean, I'll take 4. I'll take the 4. I don't need glowing perfection, but and I also felt like, her criticisms were valid too about the story. And one of the things that she said was like, if someone else might read this and it'll be a 5-star review. She's like, I liked the characters, but I had trouble connecting to them because I had never experienced something like this in my life, where I felt like I had to entirely rebuild my life and fix things or change or like start over and really figure out my life as a 30 something or year old woman. So she's like, so I had trouble connecting with that part of Daniela's story. But she's like, but the characters themselves were likable and believable or whatever. But that's the reason why I could not give it a 5-star review, because I did not feel that connection to her. And that's totally valid, right?
Yeah, as a reviewer, I get no, excuse me. When I'm doing something like, I use Storygraph now. I abandoned Goodreads. Um, when I'm giving like stars, I have to remind myself, like, I'm not being objective right now. This is about my taste.
Yes.
Because when I write a review, I want to talk. I mean, obviously, I'm giving my opinion, but I want to talk as objectively as I can about what's happening in the book, what the author is doing, so that the reader gets an understanding and can figure out for themselves if it's their jam. But
Yes.
that's not what you're doing if you're just giving something stars.
Right. So, and there are, in my opinion, there are different kinds of reviews, right? Like, if this is being reviewed, if it was being reviewed by like someone looking for a strictly contemporary romance, it's not going to get reviewed very high because it is not your typical contemporary romance. One of the things that I received a lot of feedback on, especially from agents, was she sleeps with other men. And I said, yes, she's a 30-year-old woman who just went through a horrific breakup and doesn't care. She sleeps with other men. She sleeps with 2 other men in this book before she meets Vincent. And they were like, real romance readers do not like that. They don't care what the character is going through. It's only about
Hmm,
the character and the love interest. And
interesting.
that was the feedback that I received. And I said, well, I'm not going to not have her sleep with other men. She's 30 years old and her whole life just fell apart.
I wonder if that's true. I've read a limited number of romances. It's actually, so one of my goals, I've abandoned my notes for asking questions from. One of my goals all the time, and I probably talk about it plenty, is to read outside of my comfort zone. Uh,
Right.
and to read genres I don't normally read. And so one year I started reading romance. Actually, a couple of times I've been recommended romance books without being told they were a romance book, and that is a surprise.
You're like, wait a minute.
It's like 10 pages in and there's genitals, and you're like, someone, you could have told me when you recommended this book to me.
Yeah, 10
Whatever.
pages in and they're naked. Yes, I get you.
Which is also like, what if I was in public, man?
I know some people have like a really, really hard time with that. I'm trying to like, so
no,
I was,
I'm not. I mean, it's not like the people in public near me can see what I'm doing. It's not.
I know. So,
Anyway.
I mean, yeah, I get you. Like sometimes you need to be warned about like that this is a romance book.
But I wonder if that's true, that romance readers only want the one love interest, or if that's just the format we're given. Because
That's interesting.
I don't see why, and maybe this is just like your book, it was made for me. Like maybe that's it. But I don't see why I wouldn't want it to be real and have because the romance that I've read have had good characters. Why wouldn't the characters be real and, want to get laid sometimes?
Because some, like, I think, some women may be different than us, where it's like they just totally want the fantasy, right? They don't, they just want these two are in love and there's never been anything before and it's just about them, right? And so, to market a book that doesn't have that at the forefront of the story as a romance, that would be like problematic for those kind of readers, right? Whereas, Sarah, you're probably lean more towards reading women's fiction that has romance in it anyway, because you're more invested in just like the characters and what they're going through, which is like my style to begin with, right? I was never really like, unless I knew it was like a Harlequin, I was never really that straight up traditional romance reader either. Because sometimes I feel like they were very sparse and you didn't really get enough of who these people were.
I'm thinking now, most of the romance I've read must be pretty non-traditional. And I will say most of it is, shout out Eliza David, who has this, I've only read the one series that she wrote, but it seems like each book starts with a breakup for her. And then we've got a new love interest. It's the same main character.
Okay.
It's interesting. Just thinking
that is very interesting, because usually also what happens in romance is it is that is their story. They get the happily ever after or the happily for now, and then you move on. Like you don't touch those people again because it ruins the fantasy, right? So like one of the things that I'm doing, my second book, my work in progress right now, which is also women's fiction, but it is heavy romance because that's what I write and I'm just leaned into it, doesn't deal with these guys, right? They're done, kind of. Their story is done. Their story is done. Now I'm writing her best friend's story. They're there, they're in it, because obviously Daniela is a major part of Trisha's life. That's her best friend, but their entire story is over. You're going to get pieces of them in the second book, but it's not about them anymore. Or really, it's not about Daniela anymore. It's about Trisha and like what she needs to go through and what she needs to learn and figure out. It's also a much darker book, which is probably why I'm struggling.
So do you have any advice for writers who are straddling that line between, I want readers and this is, I want readers and I'm not sure if I'm writing something that'll get them?
Ooh, that's a hard one.
I mean,
I don't know if I really have any advice on that.
I always say, write first, worry about an audience later. Because if there's nothing written.
I mean, I will 100% agree with you. Like, you have to write what is true to you. And otherwise, because then readers they're not stupid and they can see through a veil of you know, I wrote it this way because I just wanted people to read it, as opposed to like, I wrote it this way because it is authentic to me as a writer. And so I think you have to kind of really stay true to that, even though, of course, we all want to be able to share our art and we want it to be successful. But, you know, you also have to stick to your guns, right? Which I did. And I kind of did it, right? So it'll happen. Again, the persistence, but also being true to you as a writer. It's very important.
Yeah, I imagine that question really comes up. I shouldn't have abandoned my notebook. I imagine that question is really coming up when you've written that draft, right?
Yes.
And I also think, long form work is gonna just suck to edit, you know? Um,
Yeah.
3 drafts of a 300-page book is a lot,
It's a,
a lot. It's a lot.
it's a lot. So this, and actually, I'm having a much easier time now because I figured things out. Sushi and Sea Lions started in dual point of view. So it was his and hers, and it went back and forth. And then it changed. Talk about these revisions, which I revised that version twice. Then when I worked with my mentor, it changed to just Daniela's point of view. So then had to be totally re-edited. So everything that I needed to was touched upon just from Daniela's point of view. And then it was revised again. So it made sure it all linked up. So what are we, four drafts? We're up to 4 drafts now. Then when it eventually made it to my publisher, I went through a developmental edit. So that's 5, and a copy edit, line edit, 6. Then I went to they send you your galleys. That was 7. And then you get this copy that I have here has, hold on, let me see if I'll hold up a page. So just being like realistic. So see, look, like it's got like my pen is in it, because this is a galley. This is not a final. So this was my hard copy in print to fix anything else. 8. You better love your book, because you will read it many, many times to fix things, change things, alter things, developmental edit, whatever. I mean, you're gonna, I know this front to back, cover, everything in it. Absolutely.
All told, start to next month. How long did it take?
For this?
Mhm.
Hold
From
on, when did
writing
I
to
when
a
did I
month
start
from now,
writing this? 4
when
years?
it comes out. 4 years?
4 years. Yes.
That feels a lot less scary for 8 drafts to take 4, If you've been like,
Right. Yes. The very first rough draft, right, took me about 6 months to write 4 years ago. My edits and revisions took me a year. That was the harder process. Going through that was the very difficult process. Then the querying was another 9 months. Then you go through the publication process and the editing and this and that and whatever, because I sold it in 2022. Yes, I sold it around this time in 2022. So yeah, about a 4-year timeline. Yeah.
sorry, just thinking about 4 years. Uh, like how different life was 4 years ago, right? Like just in
So different. So different. Very. Yep.
So we've abandoned our notes. Is there anything you want folks to know? Any I don't know, any questions I didn't ask that I should have?
Maybe I'll just leave with like a little bit of like words of like wisdom. Don't ever, so this is something I had to learn and accept. comparison is the root of all evil.
Mm,
Do not compare your writing journey to anyone else's. It's about how you define success and about the things that you want. And everyone has their own journey and how it unfolds and how it happens. It's never too soon and it's never too late. And you just have to go with it, and you have to, be true to yourself while you're going through it. And I think that was very helpful for me a lot. Once I accepted that, that was very helpful.
that's beautiful.
Hmm.
And my final question, why do you write?
I write because it helps me make sense of the world and the way I feel about things. And it, at the end, even though sometimes it really frustrates me, it gives me a sense of calm and a little bit more understanding. And it just helps me work through things. So that's why I write.
Thanks. I like that answer.
Thank you.
I don't really imagine, unless you were like, I have to, they pay me. I don't think there's really a bad answer. That's why I asked that question.
I love that question. It's a good question. No, I don't get paid. Okay.
Yeah, actually, okay, addendum.
Yes.
How do you do this and also, have a day job and a life?
When I really figure it out, I can let you know. It's hard. It's
You're like,
hard. It's
what is
hard.
life?
Yeah. What is life? Again, like, I already talked about like the stress and like the struggle and like the stuff that I'm going through. And, like I managed to write kind of like half a book, but I'm kind of like, right. It can be very difficult because my day job is also pretty it's not stressful. It's pretty stressful. And I was just dealing with like some emotional things and stuff like that. So again, like that pulled me away from the manuscript. I think, it can be hard. It can be really hard to make the time and the space for that. I do better in the summer because I do still have a job, but I don't have a job. Does that make
Teachers,
sense?
man.
It's fucking teachers.
Uh, God, this is so fun. I want to. Yeah, that makes sense. I have heard the second book is like way harder to write.
I do not know what it is. Me and my other writer friends and other 2023 debuts are all talking about why is the second book literal absolute fucking hell. It is. I'm telling. This is the thing. It is the thing. It is.
I've heard that.
Second book fucking hell. It's like you totally forgot because, and I think I have figured it out. It is because you were so focused on your first book for so long. It is your child. And you wanted to do well and you wanted to be successful and you finally did it and you sold it, whether it was with an agent that got you a big deal or a small press or whatever it is that you did. It's your baby and now it's out there in the world, but you're still a writer. And you're kind of letting go of that book and letting it do what it will. And you need to write another book, but that was the first one. It is the first one. And it's what got you into the world you always wanted to be into. And it's special. And so the second book, you kind of get blocked. Like you meet like this block and it's like, but I got to finish writing the second book. It's true. It's awful. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't written a second book. I haven't finished the first one. But I imagine there's some combination of expectation. Like you did it before, so you're like, I can do this again, and then you're like, why did I think I could do this?
Yes.
I don't know, but I hear it universally that the second book is hell.
It is. It's like, I think you're like, why is it so hard? Right, this so hard. I still write it.
That's right. My spouse just carried concrete up the stairs, and it was quite a thing to see.
Like solid concrete?
It's a planter, but it looks like it's just concrete. Like it looks like somebody dug out a rock.
Well,
Very strong
I
guy.
was just gonna say that's like a very strong.
I do not
I would
take
be.
away from that.
I'd be sobbing. I'd be sobbing. I'd be like,
I wouldn't even
probably.
try. I would
Yeah.
not. I would not try.
Oh no! What? No! Oh, I can't.
So thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome.
Things that are coming up at the Midwest Writing Center. Very exciting. This weekend we have a ton going on. Sunday, the 16th. We are not usually Sunday people, but it is a Sunday that we're doing stuff. We've got our final collaboration, or at least this round, our final collaboration with Nahant Marsh Education Center. Aubrey Ryan will be teaching poetry in nature. Get to go hang out at the beautiful, beautiful marsh and learn how to learn poetry from an absolute star. Aubrey's a great educator. Aubrey's an excellent poet. It'll be a really fun class. I'll be there if you want to hang out with me. I'm not a good poet, so you will definitely be better than someone if you come to that class. That is $15 for members of either the Marsh or the Writing Center, $20 for non-members, open to anyone. Then that night, at 5 o'clock, we have our National Poetry Month celebration reading at Rostalks. So at 5 o'clock, anyone who has participated in any of those Nahant workshops will be welcome to read. At 6 o'clock, we'll have a very limited open mic, 1 hour. You have to sign up in advance and you get up to 5 minutes, no more, for our open mic. And then at 7 o'clock, we are having the release party for Emily Kingery's chapbook Invasives. That'll include readings from Melissa Estes, Lexi Burks, and Lola Nakashima Brook. Lola Nakashima Brook hopefully continues to be an intern with the Young Emerging Writers internship through the Midwest Writing Center. And on April 28th, she will start her term as the Iowa State Youth Poetry Ambassador. So that's Iowa's version of a youth poet laureate. So very big deal. Really excited to see Lola take on that mantle. Saturday, I forgot to include Saturday because I was excited about Sunday. We do have Writers Studio that'll be both online and in person. Those are separate, not hybrid, from 11 to 1 p.m. Central Time. Anyone is welcome. I host the Zoom one, and there's a group that meets at the Midwest Writing Center. That's ground floor at the Rock Island Public Library who meets there. That's our workshop group. So come with a work in progress and we will try to help make it the piece that you want it to be and not give you our personal taste. We want to make you the writer you want to be. We don't want to make you the writer we want to be. Then more things are happening. Okay, yes. The last Saturday of the month, April 29th, we're so delighted to sponsor one of the Illinois Humanities Gwendolyn Brooks poetry classes for youth. That is at the Writing Center at the Rock Island Public Library on April 29th. If you are outside of the Iowa, Illinois area, I will be in Viroqua, Wisconsin on April 29th for the Ridges and Rivers Book Fest. Come hang out with me at the book fair. We'll have a good time. We are accepting applications are open for the Young Emerging Writers internship. That is for student writers 15 to 19 years old. That's a paid internship. We do an intensive workshop program for 10 weeks. And then we put out a literary magazine. So you'll end up paid, you'll end up published, you'll get information on how to workshop, how to write, edit, and design a book. Whew. Apps close for that, I believe, on May 15th. We're also accepting applications for the Great River Writers Retreat. That is for Midwest writers, anywhere in the Midwest, who want a week-long, it's a contest, a week-long retreat at the, I can't remember the name of it. It's a beautiful monastery in the woods in Rock Island. All expenses paid. And then the winner also will headline a reading while they're in town here. I think that's what I got for you for upcoming events. Of course, the Writers Studio, that workshop group, is the first and third Saturday of every month. And upcoming Write More Lights, we're going to do a haiku class. We're going to do a microfiction class. And so haiku is with Tate Lewis Carroll. Microfiction will be with Misty Urban. And then we're going to do a day on comic writing with Beatrice Shares. Whew, okay. I usually talk so fast through that, but I'm like panting at the end. I think I did okay this time. Okay. For those who would like to do the free write, I'm gonna give you the prompt and let you head out because I've taken over an hour of your time. But I would like you to take a character, probably a femme, who is going through something. This can be poetry, this can be epistolary, this can be fiction, nonfiction, essay, whatever comes naturally to you. And try to get them out of that rut. As always, thank you for joining us, and please write more light into your life.